Your ARFID has developed for a number of very good reasons, and autistic traits might be one of them. With a current estimated 23% of people with eating disorders also being diagnosed with autism, let's discuss today the very specific link between autism and ARFID. Why does ARFID develop? Why is it linked to autism? And how do we recover from ARFID? Hello, my name is Ruth. I'm an accredited eating disorder specialist and trauma therapist. Firstly, to understand ARFID, we need to understand autism. Autism continues to be poorly depicted in the media and shown in a very gender-biased way, with incredibly few female characters on screen ever being openly autistic, which means that many people don't actually understand what autism is or have a very biased or prejudiced lens of it. There also continues to be a high level of gender bias in the medical industry, meaning that women and girls regularly go undiagnosed with autism, with my oldest patient I had diagnosed at 83 years old. Firstly, autism is not an illness and it's not a disease. It's not something you can catch or contract via a vaccination. Whilst we don't yet fully understand why autism occurs, we do know that there are pretty strong genetic links. Autism is simply a spectrum of cognitive differences, with some of these differences being incredibly empowering, beneficial, and others being more challenging to manage in the world we live in today. Some people with autism have high intelligence levels, others do not, and others have learning challenges woven into their autism. Really, there's no one way to be autistic, and traits differ from person to person on a wide spectrum. Autism does not define a person, it's just part of their overall makeup. You'll also find some neurodivergent people like myself have very strong autistic traits, but don't fit the whole criteria for autism. But what's really key to note here is that some autistic traits can really collude with eating disorder behaviours and can make eating certain foods or food groups very challenging. ARFID is a particularly unique eating disorder because unlike other eating disorders, the challenges with food in ARFID are specifically linked to sensory difficulties. ARFID is specifically diagnosed when the person's avoidant eating has nothing to do with weight loss or body dysmorphia, but instead has to do with a lack of interest in food, sensory difficulties with food, or fear or anxiety about eating foods in the home or in certain environments. For many people who are both autistic and more broadly neurodivergent, one of their traits can be sensory overload and overwhelm. This can be, for example, struggling with specific temperatures, levels of noise, or lightness and brightness. With foods, it can be around textures, temperatures, or even around difficulty swallowing foods. And some people have fears around physical consequences of eating foods, unrelated to body weight or shape. Additionally, autism can also come with social differences, which are not inherently bad traits. People who are autistic often also like routine and consistency, but this can make eating foods in new environments overwhelming, or can make trying new foods or food prepared in different ways than usual challenging. Often our eating disorders are subconscious coping mechanisms that we have developed to help us deal with unprocessed or present traumas, by, for example, giving us a false sense of control, security, or detachment. Due to gender bias in medicine and the poor media representation of autism, women and girls remain severely underdiagnosed with autism. In my own practice, I am regularly supporting women to gain a late diagnosis and support. But this means that for many, their eating disorder has become a way for them to cope with the trauma that surrounds the lack of support or understanding around their autism. My patients often describe spending their lives masking their overwhelm, overstimulation, and sense of otherness, with oftentimes this masking eventually resulting in burnout in their teenage or adult years. This very much compounding their disordered eating symptoms. There's also still significant shame, blame, and stigma around the idea of autism, meaning many parents and carers resist getting their child a diagnosis or support at an appropriate age. Or adults avoid it themselves in fear of humiliation or rejection. And this again means that the person or child has to develop coping mechanisms like eating disorders to help them cope with the overwhelm and overstimulation of their day-to-day lives, because they lack the support they actually need. ARFID is a very specific eating disorder and therefore requires a very specific recovery path. Firstly, for those flagging as autistic but are undiagnosed and unsupported, it's always my first line to encourage a full autism screening to gain the support needed to thrive. I have even recently taken on an autism specialist in my own clinic to allow my patients the space to find the support they need in a one-to-one capacity. Secondly, it's important to try and understand how the ARFID is presenting and why. This will help us understand whether we need psychological support, support from dietitians, autism support, even support from speech and language therapy around swallowing and chewing. And usually it's a combination of all four. ARFID can be severe, but like all other eating disorders, recovery is absolutely possible. And if you are struggling with ARFID, please do reach out for support. Reach out to a loved one, your GP or family doctor, or a registered professional like myself. Until next time, be kind to yourself, my love.